Hey runners, welcome back. Within this video, I want to try and convince you that there is a better way to be approaching your next marathon. The vast majority of people, when they're approaching a marathon, start with a finish time and work their way backwards. And I think that is the worst way to be approaching a marathon because it completely negates your personalized physiology and means that you're most probably training incorrectly to get the most out of yourself. When we start with a finish time, we're ignoring what our maximal capacity is to cover a 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers. For the vast majority, on average, we're running 3 to 3.5 hours, at least those of you who are watching my videos, and we're looking at 3,000 to 3,500 calories. So if we call it 3,000 for easy maths, we have 3,000 calories to run our marathon. Now, this is completely independent of 305, 307 finish time, a 259. This is just the energy that we have available to cover the distance. To optimize our marathon, we want to figure out the most effective and efficient way to exert those 3,000 calories across a marathon. Now, a lot of people are thinking, hey, if I just go, get to halfway and evenly distribute it, so I've got spent 1,500, then I've got the 1,500 for the remainder. Well, when we're looking at a marathon, most of you have been there, at least been at the back end of some kind of race. It is much harder at the last quarter than it is in the first half. And that's because we have on average for recreational runners, 10% loss of running economy, which equates to around a 3 to 5% loss increase of energy output. So that means it is costing us more to run at the same pace at the back end of a marathon than it is at the start. That's due to just an overall loss of muscle function and neurological inputs, as well as some loss of our biomechanical resources and the efficiency of just utilizing oxygen to generate ATP to generate muscular contractions. So then as we look to the contrast, like looking rather than at energy, we're purely looking at time. What I hear a lot is, all right, I want to do this finish time. I know it's going to be hard. I don't know any of the numbers. I just know it's going to be hard at the back end, and a lot of people slow down. So why don't I bank some time? So let's say we'll have our average at 7-minute mile, and then a lot of people want to bank a little bit of time. Maybe it's going to be their day. So they're going to run a 7:50-minute mile. Now, when we do this, we are exponentially reducing our capacity to run the same speed in the back quarter of a marathon, because the increased energetic cost of speeding up is non-linear, which means it doesn't take one calorie to go 1 second per mile per kilometer faster. It may take 2, and then to go another second faster would be 4, another second faster you got 3 seconds, but now you're 4 squared, so you're at 16, and it just exponentially increases our energetic cost for not that much speed, which means we're going to get to halfway and we could be at, so just call it 1,600 calories. Now we have less than 50% of our total energetic capacity to run a marathon left for the second half, which is always going to cost more. Not only that, not all calories are created equal. So the more we speed up, the closer to our lactate threshold that we end up. The more carbohydrates we use, the more lactate we produce, the more acidic our cellular muscle cell environment, the less economical that cell becomes for generating muscular contractions, and so the greater this loss in running economy becomes. So purely by thinking that you're going to bank time, you are costing so much more in the last closing stages of the marathon. This is why I say I want your physiology to dictate your finish time, not your finish time to dictate your physiology. If, like you can do within my training plans, figure out what is your capacity for running a marathon. So you want to be able to do something like, let's say a half marathon. Let's just call it, you've run 2 hours and you've been able to run at 160 BPM, and that's like a stable metabolic steady state, and you know that's within, you know, your zone 3, something you've been able to do in the past. You look back at past marathon data, what's heart rate have you averaged, and then you can look at the pace. So let's call this one your 705, and we'll call that minutes per mile. So you've done your 2 hours, 160 BPM, 705 minutes per K. Now you get an understanding of what is your capacity to be able to run a marathon. That's why doing large blocks of marathon specific efforts within your build up to the marathon can help you understand what is your capacity, so then you can take into the race a realistic expectation of what your finish time could be. But we can add multiple factors here, where this being an ideal scenario, right, where we have an understanding of what we're able to do, we get temperate environment, flat course, and everything is working out perfectly. But often our race will have some kind of elevation profile, or the conditions are less than ideal. So for now, let's add some headwind right in the green. There we go. And then red for like these are heat, right? So it ends up being hot. So when we have a hilly terrain, when we run up the hill, we're going to encounter an increased gravitational resistance. In order to overcome that, we need to exert more force. This force comes at an energetic cost, right? So if we are trying to maintain our goal output, whatever that is, let's call it the 7 minute pace through here, we are going to rapidly increase our energetic costs. And remember, it's non-linear, so it is an exponential cost of energy. So that when we get to this halfway point, we could be at 1700 kilocalories, but we only have our 3000. So now, through ignoring the challenges of the terrain, we end up being in a worst case scenario and we start to slow down. Often I hear people being like, oh, you know, I didn't take on enough gels, I didn't hydrate enough, I need to do more strength training, I fell apart at the back end. Often it's none of those things. It's just purely a fact that they didn't account for the total energetic demand of the first and second half of the marathon. So what we have to do in this scenario is slow down, right? So let's say within our training, we trained appropriately and specifically towards the demands of our race. And in this scenario, we added running power. We now have a better understanding as to what is the energetic cost of running our marathon and our energetic capabilities based off of our physiology. Because with running power, we have force times velocity, which is the pace, you know, you're going at. So we're able to get energetic output. Energy over time is power. So once we have that, we can then say, look, I was able to run 300 watts. So up here, I'm going to, up the hill, I'm running 300 watts. Down the hill, it's kind of a metabolic estimation of the cost of running. So I'm not going to call our running power at this stage the most accurate output, but we're going to then run on the downhill, and overall we want to be averaging our 300 watts, right? So that's the amount of energy we've exerted on average across the time or the distance, so like that being halfway. From that, we then get our pace. So let's call it, in this scenario, a 7:10 minute per mile. So if we were purely looking at pace, so like a distance time relationship, we're just looking at, there's the marathon distance and here's my finish time, which equals that pace, we'll severely overestimate our capacity, our energetic capacity on this hilly course. If we only look at what has been and is my energetic capacity to run a marathon on any given terrain, which is 300 watts on average, we run that, we then get our time distance relationship, which is our average pace. And that's going to mean that when we get to this halfway point, we are there at the right amount of energy so we can account for the inevitable slowing down, and this loss of running economy is not going to be as drastic as if we tried to chase pace purely, and we are in a better position to optimize our running performance based off of our capacity. Now, there's always going to be other factors like headwind. Headwind is far harder to measure. Stride, with the barometer built in, can sense pressure changes, so it does have, at least some inclination as to an increase in power output or energy at cost. For a headwind, there's nothing besides the core body temperature sensor that can monitor how hot your body is and how hot what your temperature of your skin is. And so then there is the metabolic load, or just heat load, the need for your body to offload heat in warm conditions, which comes at, again, an energetic cost. So there's harder to measure these outputs. But if we don't account for them and we're purely looking at a best case scenario, we will again get to that halfway point above 50% energy, or at least above whatever our capacity is, and that ends up slowing down. So in a hot environment, we need to be particularly careful, because regardless of what kind of energetic output we're doing, there is a huge loss of efficiency or loss of energy through the metabolic process as heat. So we're going to generate a lot of heat. You guys have been for a run, you go red, you get hot, you get sweaty, regardless of the temperature. So in a hot environment, that further reduces our ability to run at a given output. So actually, our energetic capacity, so let's call it 300 watts, in hot environment may be reduced by, say, 10%, which is 270 watts, so 30 watts different. So if we don't account for any of these condition-based factors within our race, and we're purely looking at just finish time and distance and an ultimate goal, then the highest probability outcome is you slowing down at the end. So this is my attempt to explain to you how and why you should be thinking about your next marathon specifically, and any other race really, in terms of your energy capacity versus time. To help you understand where you sit relative to your physiological capacity, your energetic output, you can download my Training Zones Threshold How-To Guide. So I talk you through how to do a threshold test, how to set your zones, where those zones correlate to given race distances and workouts. And then I also have all of my training plans, which just walk you through all of these processes all the way up until race day. So I'll catch you on the next one. All the best with your training. Cheers.